Great is your name in all the earth. Amen. Are you thankful tonight? Amen. I'll tell you what, God gives us a story, and tonight you're going to hear mine. This morning I was talking to someone at church, and they said, "So you're going to share your testimony tonight at Wellsville?" And I said, "Yeah, I certainly am. I'm looking forward to it." And he says, "Oh, God has given you such a good story, such a good testimony." I put my arm on his shoulder, or my hand on his shoulder, and I said, "Look, God gives every one of us a story. What we ought to do," and I'm a rebel, so I don't like to say ought to or should. You should. But what we ought to do is share that story with others. We come in contact with people every day who are lost, dying, and going to hell because the church folks aren't sharing the story. So I'm looking forward tonight to sharing my story with you. And it began long, long ago. It really did. I like to tell stories, and they start with long, long ago. But anyway, I'm from right here in Allegheny County, and I grew up in Ojai, no zip code, New York. And at the time I was growing up, there was a store on the corner of Route 305, but that store's not there anymore. And God has taken me full circle. And He's given me something to share, and I want to do that with you tonight. I graduated by the skin of my teeth, if there is such a thing, from Portville Central School. And right out of high school, I went into the Army. And I got some hard lessons there while I was in the Army. As a matter of fact, it took me, they liked me so much, I should say that, is I got to go through basic training twice. Now, if you're prior military, you know why I went through basic training twice. I hated the Army. I hated it at first. I hated it so bad that during grenade training, I almost blew up my drill sergeant. I pulled the pin and tossed him the grenade. He hit the ground and covered me, and life goes on. Okay. And anyway, so I did spend the first year and a half or so with that rebellious stage, and they worked that out of me. They showed me the way. After a while, we were standing in line, and this is God, even though I wasn't a Christian, this was God. We were standing in line getting our assignments, and it was like Jackson, Vietnam, Jones, Vietnam, Jordan, Germany. I didn't go to Vietnam, and that was probably a good thing. I know many of you probably have been there. I know my brother over here was there, but it was probably a good thing. God knew what He wanted to do with me, and so He sent me to Germany. I was very crooked, very evil. I did some very bad things early on in the Army. And I thought I could get my way and do anything that I really wanted to do. I went to Germany not as a company clerk, but disguised myself as a company clerk, and learned the different regulations, and became like Radar, if you've ever watched that MASH. Really, I knew every Army regulation and pamphlet by number and like that. And well, it was time to leave Germany. Oh, wait a minute, I forgot my wedding. Let me say, we got married in my childhood sweetheart. We got married in 1972, July 1st, 1972. I asked her to be my girlfriend on, what day was that? October 12th, 1967, and we've been together a long time. She's put up with a lot. She really has. So she came to Germany, and we had our fun there. And being the crooked clerk that I was, I really thought that I could get to Fort Carson, Colorado, because I wanted to go to the mountains. That's where I wanted to go, and I knew I could get there because I could type the orders. Yeah, I could, and it didn't happen. And I was actually supposed to leave Germany in February of 74, and they kept postponing that and postponing that. And then finally they asked me if, look, you can't go to Colorado. We have a slot for you at Fort Benning, Georgia. Now, being the flunky from Portville, I couldn't locate Georgia on my mental map, but I took that assignment, and we went to Georgia. Best thing that could have ever happened. My wife, Linda, immediately found a church, Benning Hills Baptist Church, and they sent the hounds of heaven after me. They would visit and visit and visit, and I would treat them rudely. They had something called VIM on Monday nights, Visitation is Missions, and they kept coming and coming. One night I saw them through the peephole, and I opened the door and blew smoke in their face. I wanted to get rid of them, but they kept coming. And one day in July of 1975, Linda and I had an argument. She was headed for church, and I grabbed the keys out of her car, out of her hand, and I got in the car, and I drove. And I still don't remember it today. I'll probably never remember it, never see it, but I ended up in Benning Hills Baptist Church. I had on sandals, cut-off jeans, a muscle shirt, and I went to church. And something happened in my heart. Couldn't put my finger on it because I didn't know what it was. And as I was leaving, I said to myself, wait a minute, you've been gone a long time. I think you need proof as to where you've been. So I grabbed one of those things that they call a church bulletin on my way out the door, brought it home, and told Linda that I'd been to church. And we started going on a regular basis. We even went on Wednesday nights a few times. And it was November 30th, 1975. I'm about to have my 35th anniversary. November 30th, 1975, that I gave my life to Christ. That's amazing. It's amazing. I couldn't get enough of God. I read His Word when my feet and knees, in the morning when I got up, my feet and knees hit the floor, first thing. I prayed. I asked God for every little thing, every little detail that might come up in our life. I prayed to God. I couldn't get enough of God. I wanted to help. I would help in the kitchen. I would help serve. I would help set up tables and take down tables and chairs and things. I'm still doing that. But I couldn't get enough of God. And I said, I'd like to help in the Sunday school. And they said, the first grade class needs an assistant. I thought, well, that's cool. Well, I did that for a while, and then one morning, the teacher called me and said, Ken, I can't be there. Can you teach my class? Now, I'm basically a shy guy. I would just soon be off in the corner, nobody bothered me, okay? So I said, well, sure. And I took I got there, and she had the stuff there for me. And I sat down, and these little kids were on these little chairs. And I said, I don't know what to do. I was scared of these little first graders. But you know what? We got through that. And that's how God has worked in my life. He's taken things like that, and He's built on it. And He's done that in your lives too. He builds us, and He makes us the kind of person that He wants us to be. If you're familiar with the potter and the clay, He molds us and He makes us into that which He wants to be. So I had plenty of opportunities to minister. I worked with the boys. We're called Royal Ambassadors and Crusaders. I worked with that group. And then a couple of years goes by, and I just feel God tugging at my heart so much. And I talked to my pastor, Dr. J. Nathan Castleberry, and he said, well, you know what I always do when I think God is speaking to me? He said, I just get off and go off by myself, take something to drink, a little something to eat, and just get off and open up the Word and pray. And he says, I know God will reveal to you what He wants you to do. And I said, okay, I'll do that. I was still in the Army at the time. I got my shelter, half a gallon of tea, my Bible, a sleeping bag, and away I went. And for some, God kept showing me a verse in 1 Peter. He showed it to me over and over and over again. And I kept, God, why are you showing me this verse? This verse doesn't make sense to me. 1 Peter 4, verse 10 says, if any man ministers, let him do so with the ability that God gives. It also says, if any man speaks, let him do so as if he were an oracle of God. Now that part scared me, so I left it out on purpose. But if any man ministers, let him do so with the ability which God gives. And I just kept coming back to that verse, and I went back and I talked to my pastor about it, and he says, well, have you ever thought about full-time Christian service? No, not a flunky from Portville. I didn't know what greater than and less than was. I just did not want to go back to school. That wasn't an option. But I accepted God's call into the ministry, and I got out of the Army, and I went to college. I took a lot of basic stuff.